So tonight I am going to share with you a journey, and it's a story, if you will, of life and death. And it's a story of the business of killing, and where you can see there, compassion and kindness is a cost, and it's a cost on profits. So, bear with me. It's a story of animals who fear and they fight death on fast-paced slaughter lines and kill floors. And it's also the story of workers, which I think is an important one, who do perform this often dangerous work. And it's, as you would imagine, soul-destroying. And it's a work that people think is quite necessary, but it's not. So, my name is Josh Agland, and I did for 3 years work in a slaughterhouse here in New South Wales. It was a cattle slaughterhouse, and it was in a small regional town. I don't know how to compare that to what Queensland would have. It wasn't a huge facility, but by American standards, but it was quite a big facility. But I think it's important to think, it's not really my story to tell. I'm just the conduit for telling the animal's story. So I will let you know that there's some graphic images, and when I say graphic, it's not cruelty as such. It's like standard things that people would, that happen all the time, and standard vision that's occurring every day, right? And it's occurring right here in Australia. So I just thought I'd let you know that. There's one small video. It doesn't show anything other than what happens in a slaughterhouse. So I just thought I'd let you know that. But I did want to note to you, and Amanda raised it too, the home truth is that the houses of slaughter are called houses of slaughter. They're not humane, they're not civilized, or any more acceptable here in our Western world than they should be anywhere else. So if you look at that slide, that's actually, I wanted to show you Western society and how we transformed slaughter of animals into this massive industry. So that was the infamous Chicago meat market in the 1940s. And that's actually where mass slaughter, industrialized slaughter actually came from. And a bit of research actually told me that the Ford setup of building a car on an industrial line, he wasn't the first one to pioneer that idea. It was actually killing that pioneered that idea. He stole it from them. Maybe they didn't want to let anyone know what they were doing. So in saying that, how can we actually think or be proud that we are more advanced in the business of killing? Like, how is that something to be proud of, that we can kill more animals and we can produce more meat more effectively and more cheaper? These are some pictures. Up the top right-hand corner is a picture of the shambles. I don't know if you've ever heard the term the shambles, everything's a shambles. It comes from this idea where in the UK they were killing animals in open slaughterhouses, and the rich people didn't want to see it anymore. They still wanted to eat it, but they didn't want to see it anymore. So they pushed it out into the poor areas, and the poor people worked in it and killed the animals for the rich people. So that's kind of another starting point of how we got to this idea of industrializing and making it this job that people should depend on. There's a few other pictures there of things where in America and over in Europe, how they transformed from something a bit more archaic in the top left-hand corner to something a bit more so-called civilized down this side. So I just wanted to, this is something I wanted to add, because last night I had the honour to go and have a vigil with Brisbane Animal Save out front of Taze, Australia. I think that's how you pronounce it. Yeah, and it was quite a big facility, and I was actually quite surprised that it was on a main road. And so I thought, man, this is like the ultimate hiding in plain sight kind of idea. there's like nice shrubs and nice white things and a nice car park out the front, and then over the back, there's things happening. So I thought, oh, I'll go and check their website. And this is their homepage, feeding people, enriching lives. I don't know what lives they intend on enriching, but it's definitely not the animals, and I can tell you now, it's definitely not the workers. So I just did a bit more research, and I was like, this is the ultimate marketing spin that we have, and Taser. When I found out that they kill about, I think it was about 1,200 individuals per day, I was like, yep, that's very similar to where I come from. So the slaughterhouse I worked in was about, at the time, was about 1,000 individuals per day, and that was a 10-hour shift. It was about 100 per hour. So that's quite a lot. In saying that, where they're getting now where they run 3 kill lines at once, and they're killing up to 5,000 animals a day. This is cattle, by the way. So I was a maintenance electrician, and I was tasked with working on the kill floor, because I was a young fella, and then you get the gruesome jobs. But where I worked was not just kill floor, so basically you got it all there. So we took these live sentient beings and individuals, and we literally went through this process. It's like an engineered process, and spat them out the other side in a freezer truck. And we did it to such a degree and such an efficiency that every minute of every day was kind of planned around this process. And we had like 700 people working on this site. And it's amazing to think that we could actually make the business of killing to such an unemotional process. So I'm really only going to talk to you guys today about the real first two, because that's where the animals are alive and where I work the most. But I just wanted to let you know that this is kind of how things happen. More importantly, there's this segregation of workers. So if you think I'm a boning room worker, you don't actually see, or you would never see, a live animal at all. It's like on a total separate part of the site. You wouldn't even go past the live animal. Maybe if you're going out, in your lunch break, you might see a truck come in, but you wouldn't even see the workers that worked on the kill floor. So because of quarantine and hygiene, they had different lunchrooms and different things. It was like a total different existence. So that's kind of how they segregate it. It's really only about 20 people that see live animals. So this is what I'm talking about. So it's graphic, but it's not anything that's we don't already probably imagine or envision or picture. Well, I'm going to touch on some stuff with the workers. It's not really that apparent there, but there's actually this really defined hierarchy on the kill floor, and it was defined by colours of hats. So a red hat was the foreman, and he was the man that controlled the speed of the kill chain, and he was the guy that set the quotas, and he was the guy that revved people up when things weren't happening right. A blue hat was a quality control, and then you had white hats, which were slaughtermen, and maintenance staff such as I was, we were either grey hats or we wore grey jackets. And purely that was just so you could look over somewhere and see who's where. The red hat would always be looking as to see who's where and why are they there and why they're not in their spot. So really, like I said, it's only 20 people that sort of see this side of the animal. And when I say that, the reason that is because there's actually two sides to a kill floor. They call it the dirty side and the clean side. So the dirty side is from the knocking box to the hide puller. The clean side is literally from after it comes off the hide puller and it goes that way. And it is a literally defined break in the chain. So kind of like the body goes through a defined section. They have different entrances and exits to the kill floor. They wear different clothes. They are trained differently, and different lunchrooms again, and they wouldn't see each other. because the chain could never stop. So if the way a lunch break worked, for instance, the knocker would go to lunch first, and it would keep going, and as it kept going past, each person would go to lunch. And then by the time it got to the last guy, the knocker was coming back. And then, so it's kind of like that old sort of, it never stopped. It was like, so the knocker's going to have his lunch, and he would never see this guy down the end with his weighing or anything, and the weighing guy wouldn't see the knocker, he wouldn't know anything. And it's kind of really a weird thing. I don't know if anyone's ever worked with something like that. The other important thing is because once you take the hide off, I definitely found it, once you take the hide off, it's no longer an animal anymore. It's literally a piece of flesh, call it a carcass, but it loses all individuality of the animal, all the markings or anything of the animal. And so pretty much if you're working on the clean side, you don't know what the cattle or the cow or the individual that was killed. You're literally seeing the same thing over and over and over again. Now, this, I'm just going to point out to you, this is pretty important. So it all revolves around what I was saying before. It was a kill as a kill chain, which is this continuous chain that goes around, right? And so that never stops, and it can't stop because the way the thing is set, you've got a quota. A quota in good times was always 1,000 head of cattle a day, or 1,000 individuals per day. And the slaughterman actually got paid bonus money. And if you didn't meet the quota, you didn't get your bonus. If you met the quota in a shorter amount of time, you got paid for a longer period of time for meeting it shorter. So it actually promotes faster speed and promotes not stopping it for anything. They literally would not stop it even if there was like a tool caught up in it, or, you know, a piece of feces or something like that. So definitely, I can tell you now, no one would ever stop it for animal welfare. It's just not something that ever happened. I never seen it happen. Generally, the only time I ever seen the chain stop when it was broken down and I was getting yelled at to come and fix it. There's another reason maybe why that is, and that's because there's these lights, if you can see, strobe lights, and they're kind of put all around in the main sections. And so if you actually did have the guts to stop it for any watch reason, that light, that red light, or whatever the setup was, would flash really, really brightly, and it would actually sound off an alarm sort of thing. So not only would the chain stop and you have all this, everything stopped, then it's going to tell you who stopped it, who pressed the button and whatnot. So then everyone starts going, why did you do it? What's going on? And what's happened? And I can tell you now, these guys are pretty tough looking blokes, but I can tell you right now, none of them would ever press that button. There was no way they would press that button for anything, unless maybe they were tied up in the chain or something like that themselves, but definitely not for hygiene and definitely not for animal welfare. Now, this is another thing I wanted to raise, and it comes down to what we were talking about before about taking the individual out of the thing. And this comes from this TASE website, and I thought it was really quite what we're talking about here, about talking about chains and factories and whatnot. So they actually say, and they're actually quite proud, the fact that they leverage integrated raw material supply chain efficiencies. So an animal is a raw material, and supply chain efficiencies, obviously that might be further down the line, but any efficiency is going to come about to save money or make money. So that just tells you, I thought it was unique to put it in here because it's like, this is the one we just went down the road to. This is local to you guys, and this is what they're thinking about. This is the level they think about. There's no mention of an animal there. There's no mention of what you're actually doing. It's actually just like producing a part out of a machine. So it was probably a little bit off topic, but I thought I'd produce it anyway. So what happens is it starts with people with the trucks coming in. And this is pretty standard of a double-story cattle truck. It looks pretty clean compared to the ones I would have seen. And I can tell you now that no matter how it was raised, whether it was grown up on Farmer Joe's nice, beautiful farm or anything like that, unless he brought it in himself, it would come on that with everyone else, and it would make no difference. They were just like packed in there. And it's an interesting thing to note when people tell me, oh, but you know, the free range, they have a better life and whatnot. Even back then, when I wasn't a vegan or wasn't even thinking really about anything, I did actually notice that the free range, or the really nicely, you know, the ones that had a nice life, they were actually the most stressed ones when they come on this truck. They were like the really, really stressed ones, and they didn't know how to walk down the ramp or come anything, and so, you know, come down the ramp properly. And it was actually funny because they didn't even know what concrete felt like under their feet. And so I remember watching them. There was these black steers, and there was a group of them, and they were doing this kind of weird little dance. And I said to the guy, the cattleman, I said, what the hell's wrong with these cows? They're like obviously scared and petrified. And he said, oh, they don't know what's under their feet. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, because it's hard. They're used to their foot pushing into something soft. And so they didn't know what it was like. And you could see how stressed they were. They were like back right up into the back of the pen. So I actually found that quite interesting, that I actually noticed that when I wasn't even thinking in that way of, you know, back then. So they would also, now I don't know what laws here in Queensland, but in New South Wales, you're not supposed to actually use one of these electric prodders unless it's absolutely necessary. I never seen anything different to that. That's pretty standard. It's got long, it's flexible. It's flexible for a reason, so they can actually jam it into them and it bends. And they know where to hit them in the right spot to make them move and comply. So what they do is they get them off the truck, they put them in a pan, and then they slowly kind of funnel them in to these ever sort of narrowing races. It goes from 4 or 5, and then it kind of narrows down until it's single file. And the only way that I ever seen them do it was with that. And the best way that they reckon you'd do that is to hit them in the stomach, or the genitals, or the face, because that moves them faster, it moves them quicker, and they don't, once one goes, they all follow, and they got less likely to start jumping out and everywhere, you know, over the top of things and stuff. But, you know, that was actually quite violent. You know, you see those things bend when they're hitting them in the face with them. And so they would go into these races. They go through this wash thing where it's actually quite, it's pretty disgusting how they treat them in the wash thing. But you would actually come up to the knocking box, right? So the knocking box is where they're going to get stunned. But as they're leading up to the knocking box, you have to have one come in at a time. So they have these little one-way gates that come in behind the cattle. And these, again, I'm going to go back to the so-called humanely raised ones. They were the ones that were scared, and like they must have formed bonds with their friends, and they wanted to run with their friends, so they didn't want to run away from each other. And so they'd often get 2 in the one where only one can fit. And so they'd be all squashed up and jumping all over each other. And the only way you could get them to move back, or keep moving, because you can't go and make them go back anymore because there's a big line going back, is to make them go forward and to hold the other one back. Now, the best way that they did that, according to them, was to jam that prodder, that electric prodder, straight into the face of the back cow and hold it there on his face until the front one moved forward. So the back one couldn't move forward. He couldn't do anything because he's getting, you know, zapped in the face. The sound that they make when that was happening is absolutely haunting. And it actually like reverberates down the race, because it seems like all the other cattle seem to form this compliance when they hear that noise. It's also very scary because this is quite noisy. As you enter here, you're entering a factory. I don't know if you guys work in a factory, but they're not quiet places. And there's this screaming, there's knocking, there's motors going, there's air pneumatics bashing around and stuff like that. So these animals are petrified, frothing at the mouth. They're not walking to their deaths easily at all. And then what they do is they'll come into the knocking box. And so the knocking box, that's just that one there. That's similar, very similar to the one I worked on. So they come into the back, and the back gate shuts behind them, and they'll put their head through a gap, which you can't see there. And then as they put their head through the gap, the knocker will push a button and a thing will come up underneath to hold their chin up. And what it does is it holds their chin up, and it also gives a firm bit of steel underneath their head. And once he does that, he's going to knock it. And when I say knock it, it's a captive bolt. So it's not a bullet, it's not anything that destroys the head or anything like that. It's actually a charge that drives a 12mm bolt, probably, I don't know, maybe 40 or 50 mil, penetrates the brain and renders the animal unconscious, supposedly. Once he does that, then he's going to flip it out, open the gate, going to roll it out on that diagonal thing, so it's going to roll out, and it's going to go into what they call a cradle, which is like a V-shaped contraption. Probably can't see it, but it's kind of, that one's going to roll out onto the floor, but it would come into this thing called a cradle, and the cradle for us was where it would flip over on its back. The shackler would shackle the back leg, and at the same time there's a guy at the front who, he's got to plug the stomach with a plug, so when they don't, they vomit later on. And he's also supposed to check if the animal's conscious. And the way they're supposed to do that is to touch the inside of their eye and to see if they blink. And if they do, then that's the chance to knock them again before it goes to the sticker. There was one guy, who's probably about my age actually, that did that all the time. And he used to cop so much crap. He lasted about 3 months. And that's because he used to do that first before he jammed the plastic rod to plug the stomach up. And they're saying, well, no, because the plug's more important, that's going to taint the meat. So he then started, okay, I'll put the plug up the stomach and then I'll test it. But by he's trying to do that, and the shackler's already shackled him, and the cowl's halfway up, so he can't. And then by the time he's chasing the cow over there to check if it's okay, the next one's already rolled out. And it actually happened where he had 2 or 3 roll out, and they weren't on the cradle anymore. And so then they literally had to stop the chain because there's cattle writhing around in a small area, and they're kicking and screaming and whatnot. So I don't know if he got sacked, but he definitely got moved on. So that just shows you that even when the point of the most significance, the most importance, that you're supposed to check if that animal is unconscious, you can't. You literally cannot do it. There's no time, there's no importance for it, there's no priority given to it, and it's literally seen as a cost, as a time lag, and it's not promoted, and it's not even it's actually condemned almost because it's slowing things down. That there is when a cow gets stuck. Now, I don't know if you know, the knocking gun doesn't actually kill the animal. It just renders them unconscious. Sticking the animal is what kills them. And where we worked, some of them cut this way. Where I worked, the sticker would actually slice from the top of the sternum all the way down to the chin, and then he would reach his whole arm inside and cut the heart. So then it would just come out like a big, it's actually quite come out like a big tap, like a big hose. It's pretty hard work. I mean, that's a big cut. You've got to do a lot of bending and moving around. And even when they are knocked unconscious, they are sort of flexing and moving around and stuff. It's quite dangerous. But I could tell you now, when I watched it, maybe 20% were still putting their head up at that stage. So, and they're not going to stop it. Because if you have to stop it and re-knock it, you actually have to go and get someone else to come and re-knock it, because not anyone else, was trained to come and knock them. So there he's cutting the back end off, and that's it there. So it's going to start to pull it off. You can see how slow it is. Like the chain's still moving. It doesn't look like it is, but it's still moving. It's just moving really, really slowly. And they've programmed it to sort of move slowly to adapt to that. And that's the pretty torturous thing that I never liked. Yeah. So that's kind of, and as you can see, once they do that, that's what they look like. They're no longer individuals. They don't have markings. They don't have any kind of personality, or it doesn't mean anything to them anymore. That's what they look like. And so what happens then? They'll go along, and they get their heads taken off, and they get to an evisceration table where they basically get all their guts taken out. It's again another slow part of where things happen, and you have to be highly skilled to do it, because you cannot break any part of the organs inside, because that will taint the carcass and taint the meat. And so specialised people work on the evisceration table. The evisceration table is quite important, because that's where, when we used to do ex-dairy cows, where you get calves, okay? So calves will come through at all different stages, depends how pregnant they are. Some are really heavily pregnant. They're all ex-dairy cows. And so depending on what level they are at, they used to go to what we call the calf room. And so the calf room, we'd only ever run when we knew we were running ex-dairy cows. So they knew maybe once or twice a week we'd run ex-dairy cows for 2 hours of the shift. And we knew that the calf room had to be manned. So I can tell you now, probably when you'd ran it through, probably at least 50% were pregnant to some degree, either early stages or at this stage here. And so what they do with those calves, depending on how progressed they are, they drain the blood out of them, and they use that fetal calf blood for medical testing, I think, or research in universities or whatnot. If they've got a hide, they'll manually skin them, and the hide is actually worth quite a lot because it's quite soft. It's never seen the air, and it's never sort of been touched before. I think that's kind of your high-level rugs or whatnot that people get. The disgusting part of all that is that literally once they do all that, they don't use them for anything else. They just throw them away. Their bodies, they go into dog food, or not even dog food. They go to just nothing. And you used to see so many calves come through on dairy, with the ex-dairy cows, and they're actually quite beautiful animals, the markings on them. And so that was probably, like I said, 50% of the time you're going to get a pregnant, you're going to get a calf come through. Then it kind of goes through and they split the carcass, and it's kind of like a big high-level butcher. They cut all the fat and stuff off. And they go into chillers and do whatnot. Interesting thing is that when they go into the chillers, it's quite spooky. Even like 3 hours later, their muscles twitch because they're acting to cold. So they've got a hot body, it's going into cold, and they're blast freezing them to bring them down to temperature. And their muscles twitch, the necks twitch, the ribs twitch, kind of like as if we're getting cold, we're getting goosebumps. And you'd have a whole rows of them all twitching like that, which is quite weird. And so that's kind of the process of what's going through. I usually talk about it a bit more, but I don't think it's necessary but now, because I want to kind of touch on why, like, what's the reason you can, or what's anything that you can get out of what I just like all told you and how you feel about it. So it's pretty disgusting stuff. I know the first thing you want to do is demonize people for doing it. It's not the right thing to do, and it's an easy thing to do, but it's not the right thing to do. Most of these people aren't doing it to be cruel at all. They're just doing it because it's a job, just like everyone else has jobs. I can tell you now, I never met any cruel people where I worked. They were all nice people. They just did this job and got paid pretty poorly to do it, lived in a crappy little town, couldn't get out of it. That was their lives. So why then should we blame them for doing something, and especially doing something that many people, I'd say a high percentage of people, could never do? They say they want to eat meat, but I'm not going to kill it myself. But I'm gladly pay someone else to do it, and then I'll pay someone else to do it, and then I'll call them cruel, and I won't call them human, because they're doing something unhuman. That's absolutely ridiculous when you think about it. So I started doing some more research, and there's a lot of research papers out have done studies in America. There's only one, I think, that's done it in Australia now. You can only hope there's going to be more. The first one that I read, which was really, really good, was that top one, and it's called Preparation-Induced Traumatic Stress, the Psychological Consequences of Killing. And it actually creates this new disorder likened to post-traumatic stress, but they call it perpetration-induced traumatic stress. So the definition between post-traumatic stress disorder and PITS is post-traumatic stress is caused by you being a witness to something that you shouldn't have been. The other is you've had to do the thing that made the trauma, not because you wanted it, but because someone told you had to do it. So it's kind of equivalent to, say, I don't know if you know, but in Sydney they had this terrorist come in and take hostages in the Lint Cafe. So a hostage would be post-traumatic stress. But the cops that went in and killed the terrorists, they would be suffering from perpetrated traumatic stress disorder. The other one. So that's kind of how she's defined it. And she literally talks about how slaughterhouse workers and army personnel are the two main people that would suffer this. Basically because they're paid to do something and they're told to do something that no one else wants to do. And in fact, if you're a slaughterhouse worker, you don't even get the accolades of what you would get if you were a board veteran or notched up some kills on your belt or something like that. You're actually demonized even more for it. She goes on to sort of say that with that, in addition to symptoms that suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety and all those kinds of things, they suffer paranoia and amnesia and disassociation from community. So they're the extra symptoms that they suffer, which amnesia, are they trying to forget what they've been trying to do? Who knows? Disassociation, you'd be pretty disassociated if someone was telling you you had to do this job and then demonizing you for you doing it. And paranoia, I suppose, I'd amount that to being paranoid of what people think of you and what you did. There's a couple more studies. The next one, which was, I'm going to note here, is a slaughter nightmare, psychological harm suffered by slaughterhouse employees. And the reason I highlight that one is because the result of hers is that the writer, Jennifer Dillard, come to the conclusion that she wanted a precedent in a legal redress to come about whereby slaughterhouse workers could actually do a class action against corporations for psychological trauma. It's a pretty big thing to think about, but if you go to the first study and you think about how that is, I mean, we don't deny war veterans their benefits for doing what they did. Why should we deny it to slaughterhouse workers? Importantly, she highlights that it's worse than anything else because, and I quote, large-scale violence and death within an institutional culture that does little to reduce animal or human suffering. So it's this two-pronged thing, so we're doing it on this large scale, but it's the culture which outside of it, that is, i.e. the consumers, are telling them, you have to do it. You have to cause suffering to animals. You have to cause suffering to yourself. You have to shovel all your emotions and all your kindness and all stuff and bolt it down to go to work, So there's two things that come to play on that. On that, I'm going to finish up real quick here. First thing people ask me when I tell them some of this stuff is like, why did I not get out earlier? I don't know, to be honest. It was a job. By about 12 months in, I didn't really think about it too much, like you guys probably do when you have a normal job. 12 months in, you're either looking for another job because you hate your boss, or you just turn up and you do your time and you go out, you check out. The other question was, did anything stick with you? Like, do you have these nightmares, recurring nightmares or memories or whatnot? And I will tell you one, because it does still stick with me. And it's the story of an ex-dairy cow, and she was put in a downer pen, which is where cows come and they can't walk, they can't stand up, and they don't push them through the cattle race because they can't walk, and they slow the kill line down. So they put them in a downer pen, and they'll either, depending on what it is, they'll kill them in the downer pen and then forklift them into the kill floor, or they'll leave them. She got left for a day, so she come in the afternoon. She had a big pink X painted on her back. And I remember her hips, you could see her hips like real bony, and she was like really big. And she was like way too sore, she couldn't even sit down. And I'm thinking, why don't you just kill this? Why don't you just pull it out of her misery? Like, she's obviously in pain. And for some reason, the vets came and they looked her over and whatnot, and they didn't. And so I remember leaving work, and I actually went around, and rather than go one way, I went around past to see if she was dead yet or if she was gone. And she was still there. And I left work like 4:30. She was there since 2. I was like, what the hell is going on? The first thing I did, I come back in the morning, next day, and she's still there. Still in the same spot, still standing up, still in pain. And they said, okay, we're going to kill her. She's first up. And I was like, okay. So we watched her, and I remember watching her go through, and I remember very distinctly that she didn't put any fight up at all. She literally just walked, like really, really slowly, with this look on her face. She knew what was going on, like, she knew what was happening. And she come up the race to go into the knocking box, and because it was at the start, only about the first 4 or 5 people were in the kill floor, so it's not too loud actually, And you could hear the sticker sharpening his knife. And I remember her coming in. She literally walked into the knocking box and put her head through the knocking box, voluntarily. And then he knocked her. She went around, and she was the first one with a calf, a big calf. And so it stuck with me because I made a connection with her, which is kind of odd. But it stuck with me because I thought, man, when I think back now, Like, that's the ultimate thing that we've taken from them. I don't know how many of you are mothers. I certainly can't be a mother. But how can a mother know that she's got a baby inside of her and still walk willingly to death? Wouldn't you fight? Even if you were injured, you'd still have fight in you to fight. She didn't. I don't know how us humans can take that from something else. Completely demolish will to not just live, but to actually fight for your baby, fight for your offspring, fight for something that's you're not fighting, not for yourself, But she didn't, and I was like, and I still can't get over that. I still can't get over how we demolished her soul and her spirit. And I can tell you right now, people that say to me, like, animals don't have souls. Well, I could tell she didn't have a soul because it was gone. Someone had taken it from her. So that's one thing that I will never forget, and I don't ever want to forget it, because it's the ultimate thing that makes sure that we keep fighting all the time. And I do want to just finish up saying, with this, that, don't feel disheartened by all this stuff, by all these stories. I mean, it's pretty bad. But it is the one thing that we can actually change individually. And by changing individually, we can actually affect an individual's life. I don't know any other thing out there where you could literally physically do something and actually know you're making that physical change. Anyone can donate money, but how much money is actually going to the charity or whatnot, But you can physically do something every day and know that you made change. And that's by not eating them, and it's not wearing them, not eating the stuff that comes out of them. And, if you want to keep going further, you start voicing it out, you start fighting for them. But this is the most strongest change you can ever make. You can't buy that change. You can't buy that feeling. And so, all this stuff, just end with hope that you can change. And you can tell people that one change, one thing, it's not a big thing really when you think about it, can save her life and her baby's life. And not just the life when you take it, but the will that goes before it, before she gets there. So I'm going to end it there, and then people can ask questions if you want about anything. Anything at all, and I'll answer it. So thanks. Does anyone want to ask a question?
I was reading on the RSPCA website, and they actually had the standards for Australia for slaughterhouse work, and it actually said, the rule said the cow is not to be stuck until it is definitely unconscious, but a couple of things, so you can definitely say that's not the case.
Yep, 100%. That's probably 25% of the time it was never like, yeah, 100%. And knowingly, everyone knew it. So it was just standard stuff, I don't think they'd ever stopped it to knock it, re-knock another cow, unless it was going to hurt a human. So, yeah. Is there any other questions?
Do they do any psychological evaluation before you get into the job?
No, I didn't. I'd assume they should do, but I did have another thing I was going to show you. It was actually in a news article where they, I think it's up here in Queensland, where they're trying to run a parole program for violent offenders to work in slaughterhouses, which I think is pretty messed up. But no, nothing like that. First day, didn't even have inductions, didn't have anything. Just go to the kill floor, here's your boots. That chain doesn't stop, that's it. Yep.
So are there no regulators to enforce animal welfare and cruelty sort of regulations?
No. It's basically, so on the kill floor, it was always the red hat who was in charge, or the foreman who was in charge for the animal welfare side of it. At the end of the day, he just made the decisions. So the knocker used to have a two-way radio directly to the red hat, and if there was a problem, he'd call him over. But it was just procedure. He'd just go, no, don't worry about it. Just do whatever.
No one external then?
No one external. The only external stuff we had was quality assurance. So they come from Aquis, which is a government body to make sure the hygiene of it was okay. But other than that, it was all internal. So, any other questions?
Do you know how old most of the cows were?
Oh yeah, so most of the steers, like the male steers, probably about 18 months. Yeah, they don't get much older than that. The ex-dairy cows, I don't know, however long till they're not worth anything, I suppose. But yeah, the males, the steers were always around 12 to 18 months, yep. Only babies, really.